I think you could still have a big market approach to doing things in a smaller community.
I can't wrap my head around everything that you do.
I like the adrenaline rush that directing gives you.
That's a quarter of a century, everybody.
Band's called Twisted Chrome.
Nobody talks to you about that in journalism school, do they?
I don't think so.
An inside look at the people in front of and behind the cameras at NTV on this episode of Inside NTV.
We got a little bonus action on Inside NTV right now, and we welcome back Matt Schick to the program, to the podcast, whatever you want to call it, here on the NTV YouTube page. And we know about Norman, Nebraska. We have that story. By the time you're watching this, that should also be available on the NTV News YouTube page. And then Zach Taylor's story from KETV, that's out on the YouTube world somewhere with KETV, so you check that out. But Matt joins us because I want to talk about Carl Pelini. In Carl We Trust. Matt, please explain.
Well, this was during the time at KETV in Omaha where you're trying to come up with different stories that we could do. And this was during the Bo fervor when he came back and they were just lighting it up over the first couple of weeks. And there were all of the plays on words with the Bo fence and I'm a Bo lever, Bo Big Red, my Bo friend's back, got Bo, like all of those T-shirts and billboards and things that were made. And I was just, I don't know, we talk about how these ideas come to you. I don't know. It just enters your brain. And I thought, how funny would it be if we made a story where the shirts and everything was about Carl, and that's actually what they were. And then had Bo play off of that, or had Carl talk about Bo and hoping that Bo's not jealous because Carl's getting all the attention. And we just flipped it, even though Bo is clearly getting all the attention and Carl's like, oh, he's the older brother and he's the defensive coordinator, but he's not getting any credit. Well, we just flipped that on its head. And so I thought, well, I contacted a local T-shirt screener and said, hey, can we do this? And they created some shirts and paid for it. But before we did that, I remember reaching out to Keith Mann at Nebraska, because we'd done a few of these stories. You know, Lane Kelly was the long snapper at Nebraska, and we did a story about how he goes grocery shopping and hikes things through his legs. We'll have to find that one somewhere. But so Keith Mann was all on board. It takes someone there at Nebraska to be like, okay, I'll be your conduit. I'll throw these ideas and see if we can set them up for you. And so we did that, and I told him the idea. He liked it. He sent it to Carl. Carl got back to Keith. Keith got back to me and said he's all on board. So during their bye week, a photographer and I went to Nebraska to film the story, and I had the shirts. And it was a pretty quiet day in the office because all the coaches were out recruiting, doing their own thing. The only two people in the office that day were Carl and Bo. And when we walked in there, we went into Carl's office, we showed him the shirts, and he was all on board with it. He just thought it was hilarious. And we're doing the story. And as we're doing the story, we kind of figure out that we don't really have an ending to the story as we do it. And I knew going in, we really didn't have an ending. I didn't know what it was going to be like. You know, there's some SNL skits or things where you just don't know how it's going to end. You just know you're going to do it. And so I remember when we got to the office, Tom Osborne had just left, and like, oh, Tom was here. And so we tried to get a hold of him to see if he would come back and film the ending. Couldn't get a hold of him. And it was a blessing in disguise that we couldn't, because at the end we said, well, what if we got Bo to wear one of these Got Carl shirts? And at the end, and so the way the story goes and the way that the if you watch it online, at the end, when Bo walks in, it's the second take of it, because originally, and there's some bloopers maybe online somewhere, but when he walked in the first time, we did not, the first time I saw Bo was when he was wearing the Got Carl shirt and came in to do it. Now, how we sold him on this idea, we had, hey, Carl, can you go pitch Bo this idea? And he's in a meeting room, maybe watching film or something. And Carl leaves the room, says the idea, and you can hear, as he's showing Bo the shirt, all we could hear is Bo laughing. That's all we could hear. So we're like, okay, he's in on this thing. And so he comes back, Carl goes, he'll do it. And so we're sitting there for the final scene where Bo's supposed to walk in and interrupt a conversation wearing the shirt and asking if Carl has a minute to talk. And Bo walks in to do it. And that's the first time we saw him. The only time I saw him that day is when he walked in to do it. And we both, Carl and I, started laughing. And we were like, okay, do it again. Now we know what to expect. And then he walks in, finishes it, pays off the story with the Got Carl shirt. And I interacted with Bo maybe for 3 minutes that day. That was it. And Carl and I kind of formed not a friendship, but kind of a good, solid acquaintanceship after that story.
Such a neat idea. And also on top of that, like, if you're a Husker fan, you know Bo Pelini and you know his personality, at least out on the sideline or maybe in a press conference or whatever. But it sounds like he was a fun-loving guy if you hit the right note.
He was a fun guy. That, you know, the cameras catch him in the most intense moments of his life, which are, you know, 3rd down and long and his defense needs to hold up, or a personal foul is called on Ndamukong Suh against Virginia Tech and he's going crazy and he can't believe it. And, you know, that's, if you can catch these people away from their work, you get to see how they really are. Be like you and me. You don't want to watch us on the set. You want to interact with us off camera, maybe on a golf course somewhere where we're far away from what we're doing. So when it's a bye week, when it's relaxing and, you know, you catch them at a certain time. I mean, Bo had a quirky sense of humor. He had an odd laugh. That was the butt of some jokes sometimes. Carl was kind of wickedly funny, had a dry sense of humor. He did great in that story. And I always found that those kind of stories, you actually, in a story that's made up and fabricated, you actually learn more about the people in them than you do in other stories, because they're being fun and funny and, you know, acting, trying to put on a show and doing something that you don't normally see. And you get to see that, oh, this person's like me. They like to laugh. They like to have a good time. And I think that's what we saw with Bo.
Real quick, is that part of the reason why you like doing these stories? The quote unquote fabricated for fun, funny type stories that you could see people differently than you necessarily would normally?
Yeah, did it with a handful of Huskers, and Zach Taylor and I will always be connected because of that one story. You know, you could do a story on, instead do a Zach Taylor story on how he did last week, or his journey from junior college. And that it resonates, but it's not as memorable. And you always remember the line, they won't remember what you told them, but they'll remember how you made them feel. And so to create that sort of reaction to it is, you know, you remember the times in your life, you remember the emotions attached to those moments, not necessarily what exactly happened. And so it's one of those things that I enjoyed it because it was different. And in this kind of medium and TV stuff, you really have to enjoy what you're doing. And what better way to enjoy it than to laugh and to share a laugh and to do something that's unique. And so, I don't know whether I remember speaking to a class one time and they said, how do you mesh, like, you'll do like breaking news stories about Dana Altman leaving for Arkansas and coming back the next day, or some other hard hitting news, but then you'll also do this. Like, how do you do those two things, and why do you do those two things? And I think the thing that bonds them both together is they're unique and they're different and they're memorable, whether it's hard hitting breaking news. Oh my goodness, I can't believe this just happened. Or it's, wow, Bo Pelini is making fun of his brother and his brother is laughing it up. Those things are very different, yet they are memorable in different ways. And so I think just creating memorable content, and a lot of times that's associated with, at least for me, associated with laughter. And that's what I'd like to do.
I know in my personal belief system, television is very personality driven. I mean, you're going to have your stories, but if you have the presenter of the story have the personality that's going to be connecting with the audience, that makes all the difference.
Yeah, it does. I mean, personality, having that cut through. They always talk about cutting through to those who are watching the show or the TV, and how do you reach those people? and personalities are a big way to do that. Whether it's the Zach Taylor story, or there was another story with Nebraska football, and it was when they had the new jumbo screen, the new big screen, when they had just created that. And I said, how fun would it be if we had like 4 Huskers watching movies, or playing Mario Kart Nintendo 64 on there, or playing NCAA football when they still had that game on there. And so we did that, and we had them playing it on there and showed their reactions to it. And it was all scripted, but it was different. And instead of like doing a story of, hey, here's the dimensions of this new big screen, and here's what it can do, we just made this thing up about them watching movies and eating popcorn together and playing video games on it. And that's much more memorable. And it's something that they're interested in. When you covering these student athletes and even coaches, if you can get them to do something they don't normally do, it's something that's unique and that stands out, they're more apt to say yes if you get that buy-in to it. All it takes is a couple of these stories to show them, and then word gets around. Remember, this is before really YouTube in its heyday. This is before Twitter and social media. So like we said, if you missed it, you didn't see it, but word of mouth was a big thing, and players talking to each other. And we did a bunch of those stories with Nebraska football. And here's the other thing. It also takes a program that is willing to allow access and willing to allow their student athletes to take part in those types of things. If you have programs that are very guarded, very rigid, very Fort Knox, you don't get to learn as much about these players and these kids, which it's really important to do so.
And if Nebraska's anything, they know how to PR, because they know how interested everybody in the state is in everything they do. So they're able to figure that. Matt Rule does that now. He has availability for his strength and conditioning coach and his nutritionist.
Yeah, I saw that recently. Like, hey, we're going to just showcase the nutrition department. And it's all about recruiting, right? So if you can show that they're having fun, if they're different, if it's unique, if the environment is a friendly, fun environment, that's what people want to be a part of. Sure, they want to go to the NFL and all that. That should be an automatic. But what kind of environment are they entered into? And I do think about it. Like, if I was working there, Matt Rule would be a great coach to take part in something like this, or any of those student athletes there. There's a lot of content there, but it's just about trying to be creative, think outside the box, stand out. And when you stand out, you allow your subjects to do that as well and be a part of something special.
Awesome stuff, Matt. Thank you again for joining us. We needed you over at the debut of the weight room today. You could have had some fun.
Yeah, that's I don't know. I could see myself like just showing off and doing the bench press, and then the camera pans out and there's like no weight on it at all as I'm being spotted and helped by a Husker or something like that. I mean, those kind of things write themselves. Self-deprecating humor, always the way to go.
Awesome. Matt Schick, ESPN, thank you again for joining us. Have a great one, sir.
Thanks, buddy. Always a pleasure.